I can tell you if a house is going to be a money pit in 60 seconds or less before you ever even step inside. Most buyers fall in love with the staging and they completely miss the stuff that costs them $20,000, $40,000, or even more. And here's the worst part. Most real estate agents, they're not going to catch it either. I've been in real estate my entire career, builder, developer, personally sold over $300 million in real estate, and my team's helped over 1,600 families buy or sell a home. So I'm speaking from real life practical experience as I share this with you today. I'm going to walk you through my exact checklist, and it's the exact same one that I use with every single buyer. Stick around to the end, and I'll share the single biggest mistake that buyers make that most agents will never tell you about. Before we get into that though, I want to preface this. You still need to get a home inspection. I'm going to share with you towards the end of this video ways to still make your offer competitive while protecting yourself with using an inspection contingency. It is very, very important that you know what you're buying. Last thing you want to do is go spend $700,000, $800,000 or $1 million plus, and you end up buying a home that's got a really big issue. And you're not going to be able to spot some of those issues just based off of this checklist that I'm going to give you today. A home inspector needs to go through the house top to bottom and make sure everything looks good. But this list is going to give you a really good idea on if there's any big red flags that you should watch out for. And we're going to talk about each one of those here in just a moment. But before we get into that as well, I want to share with you that if you see one or two of these things, not the biggest deal, you just want to do some more digging, some more due diligence in it. But if you start seeing 3 or more things, that could be a really big red flag that maybe this isn't the right house for you. So let's jump into the list and dive right in. The first big red flag is neighborhoods. Okay, so I can spot this one very, very quickly. I'm always looking out for being off busy roads. I don't like being off roads that are major arterials, that are highways. Anything like that is going to be a very, very hard home to resale. And a lot of buyers don't actually think about how hard is this house going to be to sell when I'm done living here. But I'm always thinking about that. We want to plan on the exit before we actually buy the house. Is this home going to be impossible to sell? Or is it going to be easy to sell because it doesn't have any of these huge big red flags? And backing up to a busy road or being off of a busy road is one of those biggest red flags, hands down. This is something you absolutely have to watch out for. So other tips when you're thinking about the neighborhood, look around the neighbors. Do you see cars parked everywhere? Do you see broken down cars being worked on? Do you see RVs parked all over the place? Or does it seem like everything is pretty well kept? I realize most people don't want an HOA, and an HOA is going to stipulate that you can't do a lot of these things, but you want to make sure that the neighbors are taking good care of their homes, everything is being maintained, and that it's not really rough when you look around to different people's yards, driveways, things like that. Okay, so the neighborhood is the single most important thing. You know, everyone always says location, location, location in real estate, and it's completely true. And location and neighborhood tie hand in hand, okay? So number 2 is the roof. I always look at the roof when I'm walking up to a home. Here in the Northwest, you see a lot of asphalt composition roofs. And with these asphalt composition roofs, you can see if it's older or if it's on the newer side of things just by how flat or three-dimensional it is or is not. If it's really flat, you know that that roof's been sitting out there in the sun for decades, probably doesn't have a lot of life left on it. If it's really three-dimensional, you see good shape to it, that's a good sign that's probably a newer roof. It's going to have a lot more age that you're gonna be able to get out of it. It's not the end of its useful life. It's not gonna be expensive to fix, but roofs are expensive, okay? So you're talking like between $10,000 and $25,000, just depending on the size of the house, if you need to replace a roof. And of course, an inspector is gonna look at this, but this is something you wanna be looking at and agents wanna be looking at when you're walking up to the home itself, okay? Also look for patches. Patches would be indicative of previous leaks. That would be a big red flag. Watch out for roof types that you're not familiar with. Like in the Northwest here, we don't see a lot of tile roofs, so be kind of wary of that. It's something that's really common in California, common in Arizona, but you don't see it a lot up here. So just kind of, be careful when you see those roofs that aren't very commonly used and make sure they're going to be a good fit for your needs and that they're not going to have any issues. Because sometimes maintaining those irregularly used roofs can be really, really expensive, especially the tile roof. So watch out and just be careful with that. But a roof is going to have a 20 to 30 year lifespan. Some of them are even 50 years. And so you want to look at the age of the house and see, okay, let's do some math. How long do we think this roof's been on here? For instance, if the home was built in 2010 and it's 2026, I know that roof's about 16 years old. It probably has not been redone. But if it was built in 1996, that could be 30 years in, maybe that roof's been redone, maybe it hasn't. That's something you want to pay a lot closer attention to. So you got to do some math, knowing the useful life of a roof is somewhere between 20 and 30 years, and that sometimes it goes up to 50 just depending on what type of roof it is. Okay, so the next one, the third one, is the foundation. When I'm walking around the foundation, I'm walking to see if there's any big cracks. Is there anything that's larger than a 1/4 inch? Small foundation cracks that are like 1/8 of an inch, smaller like that, don't really concern me, but I want to make sure there's nothing that's bigger. You know, if you could like stick the tip of your finger in it, that could be very problematic, that maybe there's a foundational structural issue that an inspector would want to look a lot closer at. In the Northwest here, there's some older houses like in the Everett area, Snohomish area, that are on what we call post and pier foundations. These are not actual poured in place foundations. They're just concrete piers that are in the dirt. And then there's posts that come up out of them. There's like a wood skirting that goes around the house. And that would be suboptimal compared to a poured in place foundation. A poured in place foundation is always going to be your best, most stable foundation type. Something you also want to look for in manufactured homes is that manufactured home actually sitting on a poured foundation, or is it just sitting on CMU blocks and then has a skirting going around the outside of it? As I'm evaluating the foundation, I'm also looking at the drainage. Okay, the drainage is very, very important. And I want to see, is the water draining away from it, or is it draining towards the house? Okay, you want to see positive drainage that's draining away from that home. This is very important. Of course, we know it rains a lot here in the Northwest. The last thing we want is the water to be running towards the house, hitting the foundation, going ultimately into the crawl space and causing moisture issues there. So the foundation is super important, and that kind of gives you an idea what to look for. Number 4 is the decks and the exterior. I'm going to just walk around, look at these things, and just look at the general condition of them. I'm going to look at the decks and see if there's any rot on them, see if it's Trex decking, which lasts a lot longer. Maybe it's wood decking. Has it been maintained? Is it pulling away from the house? If I can see, like if the deck is elevated on the second floor, has it been lag bolted into the structure? Is it just nailed in place? These are all things that I'm looking at. Does the post and beams look square? Are they twisted? Are they rotting? Did they use pressure treated lumber? These are all different things that you want to look at as you look at the decks and the exterior. On the exterior as well, look for big cracks in the driveway, patios, things like that. These are not structural in nature typically, but if there's big cracks, it could be possibly indicating that the compaction was not done properly before they poured the concrete on top of that particular area. So you want to watch out for that because it could just get worse the older it gets. You also want to make sure, like, is there any unpermitted structures on this property? You know, like maybe an unpermitted shop, something like that. That would be a big red flag. You want to make sure that you're getting permits pulled for everything that you add to a property, or it can cause major issues later on. So you'd want to dig deeper into that to verify that permits were actually pulled for anything that was added to it. That'd be like a DADU, additional dwelling unit, a shop. You know, you don't need it for like a shed or something like that, but these larger structures you absolutely do. Number 5, as I walk into the home, I'm looking at the floors and the ceilings right away as I walk through that front door. And when I look at the ceilings, I'm looking for water stains. Is there anything that looks like possibly had a leaking issue from the roof earlier? Again, back to when I was talking about the roof, I talked about those patches. You know, watch out for those. Those would translate to possible water damage inside the house. I'm also looking at possible water damage on the floor. If you see water damage on hardwood floors, that's a really big red flag that there was a big leak issue at some point. And typically water stains on hardwood floors don't sand out. Those are like permanent stains. The flooring is going to have to be removed. New flooring is going to have to be put in. Could be very, very expensive. But water intrusion is a very, very big issue in the Northwest. And you want to be looking all over the house, both outside and inside, to make sure you're spotting any signs that there's been water issues with this particular property. If you see patches on the ceiling, it's another big red flag. What happened in this area? More often than not, it's going to have been a leak. If you see like spotty patches of paint, also a red flag. So just look around the ceiling, look to see if you spot anything like that. If you see cracked tile, that'd be another red flag that maybe some moisture got in, caused settling, pop tiles, things like that. But just look at the floors, look at the ceilings, and we're looking for possible signs of water intrusion in the past. Okay, they're always going to show up in those areas, even if the seller tried to hide them. Next up, number 6 is the windows. Windows are very expensive. Like if you've never put windows in a house, it could be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to pull the windows out of that home and put in new vinyl windows. Back in the day, like the 70s, they used aluminum single pane windows. These are very expensive to replace. They don't hold heat very well, so the home is going to be very cold in the wintertime. It's going to be very hot in the summertime, And that's not really what you want in the climate that we have here in the Northwest. The seals are going to be, failing all over the place. Typically, you're going to see that by sweating on the glass. You're going to see really sticky slides. You want to watch out for the aluminum windows. Like, this is a big, expensive update to a home if you have to do it. And a lot of people just totally miss this. They don't even look at the windows when they walk in the house. But again, look at the age of the home. Vinyl windows started being used in the late 80s, early 90s more commonly. But if you go back to like the 70s and part of the 80s, you will see these aluminum windows used all over the place. And you really want to watch out for those single pane ones in particular. A double pane window is going to be a lot better. And then of course, vinyl is going to hold up a lot better than aluminum as well. Don't forget, aluminum windows do sweat, so they are going to have water on them, condensation, and that can cause possible moisture issues as well. So windows are a big item. Number 7 is the electrical panel. So I'm not an electrician, but I know enough to open up the electrical panel and just see how it looks. I'm looking to see if anything has been scorched inside this panel, indicative of possible wiring issues, looking to see if it's a 100 amp versus a 200 amp panel. Not a big deal either way. It's just something that I want to know on the home, that you want to know as a possible buyer of this property. You want to evaluate what are your electrical needs. If you've got car chargers, like, for your Tesla, or if you need like welding power, is that panel going to be able to service what you are actually needing to do there? So you want to flush that out, and you want to just look to make sure that there's been no damage to that panel. That'd be indicative of a wiring issue. When you think about electrical too, in our area here in the Northwest, knob and tube wiring was very common in older homes. 30s, 40s, 50s, even some 60s homes have knob and tube wiring. A lot of times it has been what we call abandoned in place, which means they just left it there, but it's not active. And that's actually okay. That's not as big of a deal because it doesn't pose the fire risk hazard that knob and tube wiring traditionally would cause. It can be really hard to even get homeowners insurance if the insurance carrier knows that you have knob and tube wiring. So watch out for that. If there is active knob and tube, meaning that's still live in the home, that's going to be something you're going to want to really flush out and get quotes on how much it could cost to pull that out. I've had that cost $10,000, $15,000 to rewire even small parts of these older homes, just because it's so much knob and tube that has to be pulled out and all new wiring, new panel that has to be put in. So electric is a big issue. The next one, number 8, is the furnace and the hot water heater. Okay, so a lot of these items are like big ticket items like roofs, furnace, hot water heater, electrical. Like, these are big, expensive items to fix. And a furnace is very expensive to fix. Okay, you're talking like $5,000 to $10,000 to put a new furnace into a home, possibly more if there's an air conditioner. So you want to look at this closely, see how old it is, and know that the useful life of a furnace is typically about 20 years. If it goes past that and it's been well taken care of, that could be totally fine. But if it's not been taken care of and it's older, that'd be a red flag you really want to watch out for. And you could be facing some big upfront cost in the first few years that you own that property potentially. So again, 20 years on a furnace. Look for the furnace sticker, which indicates the last time it was serviced, and see if this homeowner has maintained servicing this furnace, or if it hasn't been touched in a decade. If it hasn't been touched in a decade, that's a big red flag that this is possibly going to be a big issue. And just like the roof, do the math on the home. Like, if the home was built in 2010, it's 2026. We know that furnace is about 16 years old. We're probably in pretty good shape. If that home was built in 1990 and that's the original furnace, we probably have an issue, and this is going to be expensive to repair and replace down the road. More often than not, going to be a replacement on something that's that old. When you look at the furnace, look for rust, look for corrosion. Those would be indicative signs that it's not been well taken care of and that it could be approaching the end of its useful life. That brings us to the water heater. Water heaters have less longevity to them than a furnace. Typically about 10 years is about as long as you're gonna get a hot water heater. Sometimes you can stretch it to 12. And a hot water heater is less expensive than a furnace, but you could be still looking at $2,000 to $3,000, just depending on what kind of water heater it is, how big it is. And you just want to look at it and see how old is this water heater. A lot of them actually have stamped on them when they were manufactured, and just see, is this 5 years old? Is this 10 years old? Is it going to need to be replaced soon? Again, look for corrosion on the top of the water heater. You would see that with the piping coming out of it. If you see corrosion, could be indicative of something that's going to need to be replaced soon. That brings me to number 9, which is DIY work. So work that the homeowner has done themselves, and not like the biggest red flag if it's just minor things, but if it's DIY work that's larger, like they tried to rewire some of the panel, if they did structural remodels to the home, that would be something that could concern me a little bit. And so when I look at the DIY work, I'm looking to see, does this look like it was well done? Does it look like it was done by a complete amateur? I'm looking for signs of sloppy trim, sloppy carpentry, uneven drywall, things like that. Oftentimes you'll see homeowners tackle paint themselves, and the paint can look really bad actually, because painting is a much higher skill than most people realize. They just think they can do it themselves, and it really looks crappy when they do. So just look at all of that. But DIY work is just something you want to be cautious with. Also check the square footage of the home versus county records. One thing you will note is that some people convert their garage into bedrooms, and that's actually not usually a legal change of the space. Like, that square footage doesn't count in county records, and it shouldn't count necessarily for the value of that home. Converting a garage into a bedroom is usually actually a reduction in value, because most people want a garage for their house. A lot of people think that just adds instant value by putting a bedroom out there, and it just simply does not. It's like one of the worst things you can do to your house. So total side note, but just look out for work the homeowner's done themselves. That brings me to the last one. I know it's a long list, but again, this is a checklist I go through with all my buyers. The crawl space. You want to just stick your head down there, look at it. Most homes here in the Northwest are on a slab or have a crawl space. If there's a slab, meaning there's like a basement, then there's going to be no crawl space, so nothing to worry about there. But if it's crawl space, you're going to want to just see, like, is there a vapor barrier, which is the plastic above on the dirt? Do the water lines look like they have been insulated? Do you see any signs of rodent activity? Does the insulation look tight and relatively clean? Rodent activity is a huge issue in the Northwest. I would say about half of the home inspections I see have rodent activity in them. And oftentimes what that looks like is the rodents getting into the insulation, pulling it out, and then obviously, defecating all over it, which ruins the insulation. Like, the insulation has to be pulled out. The vapor barrier has to be redone. Rodent abatement has to be completed. You're looking at $3,000 to $6,000 usually for a normal crawl space to do this. So very, very important to look at the crawl space, make sure it looks good. And then the home inspector is going to look very carefully at this for you as well. So long list, but the single biggest mistake, I promised you I'd share this, is that buyers make the mistake of waiving their inspection contingency. In 2020 and 2021, I sold over 80 homes per year with buyers, not even just sellers, just buyers. And I beat 15 to 20 other offers while still protecting my clients with inspections. It takes the right agent to do this, and it takes the right strategy as you put your offer together. There's a couple things that you can do. You can inspect the home before you offer on it. You can have a shortened contingency, which helps a lot. You can have a pass-fail contingency, which means that you can't ask for repairs, but you reserve the right to back out. Or you could do a limited repair scope, meaning like if repair items would exceed a certain dollar threshold, you can ask for those to be fixed. But if they're below that, you're not going to ask the seller to do it. The seller knows they're not going to nitpick things. So those are just 4 inspection strategies you could possibly use. There's a couple others as well. And my guidance to clients is always really house to house specific. There's not just one that fits all use cases. So we got to look at the house, we got to look at your particular situation, and then make the best decision for you. But you want to consider an inspection in some way, shape, or form, and not just buy blind just to win the house. Tell me in the comments below, though, have you seen any of this on any homes that you've toured? I do read every comment, and I'll do my best to comment back to you. If you're thinking about buying or selling a house right here in Snohomish County, definitely reach out to us. There's a link below in the description as well. You can go to meetthenovaks.com. That's Novak, novaks.com, and you can connect with us there, and we can see if we're a good fit to help you. We work with motivated sellers and qualified buyers each and every day. And like I said earlier, we've helped over 1,600 families right here in Snohomish County make a move in the last 9 years.